Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention for the new superstar in the world of chess. His name is Faustino Oro. It's a 9-year-old boy from Argentina who is making headlines with some amazing results. Well, first of all, Faustino learned to play chess during pandemic, so he's the product of this chess boom in these times. He's been playing a lot online. And he won also the Pan American Youth Championships under 8, under 10. Very nice results, but okay, every continent has its own championships, its own winners. But this kid is really strong because just on the new rating list published in June, he just crossed the 2300 barrier. So that enabled him to request the FIDE Master title, and that makes him the youngest FIDE Master in the world, with a rating of 2316. Absolutely amazing. And then I understand you're interested to hear what other top players, how strong they were in their youth. Well, just as a comparison, Magnus Carlsen got only this rating of 2300 at the age of 12 and a half. So there's a 3 years difference, and you can say that Faustino is like three years ahead on schedule, which is absolutely amazing. And I thought, let's have a look at a recently played game of him. He played it in Title Tuesday online on chess.com. And let's see how strong this talent actually is. Because I think just from this specific game, I can already show you his main strengths and in which sides he can still very much develop. So he's playing with the white pieces against an IM international master from Turkey. Also a very strong player. He's around 22 years old. And his name is Chemkan Gokarkan. And Faustino playing with the white pieces, you can already see that he's an attacking player. He loves 1e4. And in this game he faced the Alekhine defense. And the first 10 moves or so are pretty normal, as black is playing quite provocatively, challenging the pawn. White's gonna advance it. And then after knight d5, d4, d6, c4, knight b6, Faustino decides to go for this line in which you're going to take on d6, c takes d6. You get an asymmetrical pawn structure, which is a good way of trying to play for a win. Knight c3, g6, bishop e3, bishop g7, knight f3, castling. And also now the next move. It's nothing special, but a 9-year-old kid normally is not going to play a prophylactical move, h3, to prevent the bishop from getting developed to g4. So either he is familiar with the theory or he just senses that it makes sense to play h3 so that black is unable to challenge that knight on f3. Knight c6, bishop e2, pretty standard. Everything has been played before. e5, and now castling kingside. So of course, white doesn't mind capture on d4. Everything will get swapped, and then the pawn on d6 is sort of a weakness. So black maintains the tension, plays here the move bishop to f5. I think this is an interesting moment because obviously Faustino is also, he's very talented, but he is still making mistakes. And I think his next move, d takes e5, is not the kind of capture you should be aiming for as white. It's better instead to advance the pawn to d5 to kick the knight away, and later on try to exert pressure against the pawn on d6. There are potential ideas to play c5 at the right moment. But let's see what happened in the game, because after all it's just a blitz game. D takes e5, d takes e5. And now white goes for the move knight d5. Very interesting move, and I believe that black should just ignore the knight. Maybe play something like e4 to open up the diagonal for the bishop. Can lead potentially to sharp play. But instead, there followed the move knight takes d5. And after c takes d5, white does get a passed pawn, which hits the knight on c6. And now, understandably, black is the higher rated player. He wants to play for a win. And therefore, the objectively best move, knight d4, it looks very logical to jump into the center, but it does allow a mess of exchanges now after knight takes d4, e takes d4, bishop takes, white is a pawn up, but black is going to win the pawn back with queen takes d5. Everything will get swapped, and that leads to a very dry endgame. That is, of course, a possibility, but it's a blitz game. And thanks for this Turkish IM Gökhan. He plays very interesting move, knight e7, but by this move, you're attacking the pawn on d5. But I'm really impressed with the following number of moves, as Faustino Oro goes for bishop c5, pinning the knight on e7. There's no time for black to take this pawn. Rook c8, attacking the bishop. The bishop comes back to a3 to maintain the pressure against the knight on e7. Rook e8, so the rook gets out of the pin, and now the knight on e7 is about to take the pawn. So white is going to push the pawn to d6. Ambitiously played. It's a passed pawn which needs to rely on the support of other pieces. Knight c6, rook c1. And now the move e4. Black is bouncing back in the center, hitting the knight, and the knight goes back to h2 with the plan of coming back into the game via g4. Therefore, black goes h5, preventing the knight from getting back into play. And well, the main question is this pawn on d6 a strength or a weakness? The big question also is, how is white going to proceed here? Is he able to find ways to support that passed pawn? But most importantly, and this is also something very unusual for such a young kid, he has a fantastic sense for where to place its pieces. And Faustino understands that the knight on h2 is out of play. He plays rook e1. Black went queen d7, very logical move to connect the rooks with each other. Not that the queen is such a great defender of the passed pawn. And maybe even more precise would have been an active move like knight to d4. Knight is excellently placed, but blitz game. Let's see what happened. Queen d7. I'm very impressed by the following couple of moves played by Faustino, as he went for knight f1 with the idea to get the knight back into play. He is a fantastic positional player as well. Rook cd8, knight e3, attacking the bishop. Black doesn't want to give up the bishop yet. Goes bishop e6, but now the knight comes into d5. So just within 3 moves, white improved its knight from h2 to the center. Is now about to come in with a knight to c7, hitting the rook and the bishop. So here you see that the pawn on d6 is very useful supporting the knight. Black decides to whip off that knight. Bishop takes d5, queen takes d5, and now the rook comes in to e5 to attack the queen. Queen goes back to d2. Bishop f8, strengthening the pressure against the pawn on d6. It's now 3 times attacked by rook, queen, and bishop, only twice defended. Therefore, rook ed1. So everything is evolving around the pawn on d6. But look, what's happening here? Gökhan plays the move e3, sharpening up the game with a pawn sacrifice. As after f takes e3, black goes back with the bishop to h6, threatening to take on e3, which is about to win a queen for black. But Faustino goes for rook c3, playing with all its pieces, protecting the pawn on e3 as well. Queen e6, again increasing the pressure against the pawn on e3, and now bishop c4. Fantastic move, very important resource as you're attacking the queen. And if you do take on c4, deflecting the rook from c3, funny tactical shot. But after bishop takes e3, black is winning the queen back. Queen takes e3, rook takes e3, materials even. And still, the question is this pawn good or not? I think it's a very complicated position with still chances for both sides. But being intimidated by Faustino's move, the queen goes back to d7. That's a clear sign that things have gone wrong for black. White's going to take over now. Even is going to make use of the open f-file. With the pawn on e3, the rook is excellently placed, exerting pressure against the pawn on f7. Rook f8, sort of only move to protect the pawn. And now queen d3. Excellent idea. Setting up the threat of queen takes g6. As this pawn on f7 is pinned, unable to protect the pawn properly. In case of bishop takes e3, You don't care about the pawn. You just go king h1 and you take it from there. All white's pieces are just fantastically placed with a lot of pressure against black's position. So therefore, black played here the move king g7. So you're getting out of the pin. Pawn is okay now on f7, and white goes rook f3, overprotecting, so that pawn on e3 is never going to be a problem at all. Rook a5, remarkable idea, but the idea is to get a knight to e5 with a huge fork against the queen and rook. Bishop d5 played. Nice centralization of the bishop, with the point that after knight e5 you can still play queen d4. And now, thanks to this bishop on d5, the rook is no longer protecting the knight on e5. The knight on e5 is in trouble and cannot be supported with the move f6, as that does allow the move rook c7. Once again, you see this fantastic pawn on d6. Therefore, instead, black initiated the forcing sequence, gave up its rook from a5, sacrificed it on d5, queen takes d5, and now knight takes f3, queen takes f3. And you see that black is still a pawn down. And what a kind of pawn it is. The pawn on d6 is a monster. After rook e8, the other rook comes in to c7, attacking the queen. Queen got to go away to e6. And now the move bishop c5 played. The bishop excellently placed, supporting both pawns. And note that black doesn't really have time here to take on e3. That allows a lot of exchanges. Queens will come off the board, and then the d pawn is decisive. You gotta put your rook behind, and then it's time to take the pawn on b7. White is a pawn up with very good winning chances. Instead, b6 was played, and now there is this move bishop to d4 with check, king g8. And now the d pawn is going to be pushed. d7, attacking the rook on e8. There is rook d8. And now, as I said, it's a blitz game. We understand mistakes being made by everyone, but especially by such a young, talented player. If you want to find a nice tactical way to finish off the game, take a pause here for a second, as there is the move queen f6, which was not played by Faustino. But it's a killer move, threatening checkmate. And attacking the rook. If you do take the queen, it's bishop takes f6, hitting the rook, and the d pawn is decisive. Instead, queen b7 was played, but Faustino shows that he has also some very creative idea in mind. He has some very beautiful imagination here, but the drawback of this move is there is bishop takes e3. And now if the bishop takes e3, queen takes e3, king h2, the king cannot hide from the checks. There's queen e5, and probably this is just going to end in a draw. But it was not played in the game. Instead, bishop g7 was played with very similar idea that if you do take on g7, now there is queen takes e3 again with check, and black is likely going to hold it. But the key move, Faustino's idea, just a brilliant move by a 9-year-old, is the move queen c8. That makes him the Messi of chess. This is such a beautiful move. The queen sacrifices itself on this square. Rook takes c8, d takes c8, you get a new queen. Queens will be swapped, and white is still a rook up. Bishop f6 played to protect the rook, but now it's bishop takes f6. Queen takes e3. Does black have a perpetual check? That is the big question. The king now is trying to run away. Queen f4, king e2. And, well, you may take the bishop back, but that's something black is going to do later. First, Gokar-chan gave a number of checks, trying to hold a perpetual. But look at what Faustino has in mind, what he's going to do with its king. Queen takes g2 with check. Now the king needs to find a shelter. Goes to c3, queen f3, another check. King b4, queen e4 check. King to b5. Where's the king going? Queen f5 check. King got to go away. Queen a6. Another check. King to b7. Queen f3. Touchdown. King b8. Fantastic move. This is something I've never seen a 9-year-old doing consciously. This is absolutely bizarre. Now finally the bishop was taken, and looks as if black is having everything under control. But What is the killer move? Da-da-da-da-dum. Queen takes d8, sacrificing the queen for the rook. Queen takes d8, and after this move, it's check. But there is the move rook c8, and there's nothing to be done against the promotion of the d pawn. And white is material up. Very impressive performance by the Messi of chess, as he has been dubbed by Argentinian newspaper. He is just a very strong kid, and undoubtedly we are going to hear much more of him in the very near future. If you feel like for this game is really interesting, just please give it a like. I will appreciate any support. Definitely we will cover more of Faustino